Morning, Leader. Yes, we've started live streaming now. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone, to November's Cabinet meeting. First of all, notice of recording to advise everyone this meeting will be webcast for live and subsequent broadcast by the Council's YouTube site. Anybody present is welcome to record or take photographs. Item 2 is apologies, and I've received apologies from Councillor Jane Francis and also from Rebecca Hellard with Sarah Punt substituting, and also an apology from Darren Huckaday, who Reggie Perrin-like is stuck on a train, unable to get here. Are there any other apologies?
What a reference that is.
Are there any other apologies? It's given away my age, isn't it, Reggie Perrin? Okay, we will note those apologies then. Item 3, declarations of interest. Does anybody wish to declare an interest in respect of any agenda item in front of us this morning? No. Item 4 is minutes. Are we happy to confirm the minutes of our last meeting? I'll sign them you.
Thanks very much, Ian, and we welcome the introduction of the minutes. I think it's really good. Just a question for legal services, really. I noticed at the bottom it says resolved. Do we take it as read that then it's a unanimous vote from the Cabinet? Because it doesn't say how it breaks down. So I'm just wondering how that resolved is arrived at. Is that we just take it that everything's read and it's unanimous unless otherwise stated?
So it is, Chair. Yeah, it is unanimous, but if there was a majority vote, that would be recorded within the minutes before the subheading which says resolved. So we would always clarify the vote and when it's not unanimous.
Perfect. That's excellent. Thank you.
Majority vote would be an interesting development. Okay.
Yeah. Bit of democracy in the OP. You were tempting me so much there, weren't you?
Happy to confirm the minutes is accurate. Yes. Item 5 then is exempt information. We have exempt appendices in respect of items 6, 8, 11 and 15. Does anybody wish to raise anything on an exempt appendix? In which case, if nobody wishes to do that, we will proceed as set out in today's agenda. So item 6 is the Arden Cross Interchange Triangle Development Partner appointment. You'll no doubt recall that we agreed a Cabinet report on the 18th of May 2021 to approve agreements for the appointing of an agent to market the Arden Cross site and to initiate a development partner selection process to select one or more entities to undertake that development. So further to the advice of ACL's appointed property consultant, Jones Lang LaSalle, for the procurement of a development partner for the site, this has now been progressed, and the recommendations of the JLL report, which is attached to exempt appendix 4, were approved by the board of Arden Cross Limited on the 24th of August this year. So this report seeks approval to update Cabinet on progress and to approve the commercial terms for ACL to appoint a development partner for the scheme. So amongst other things, we're asked to approve the appointment of that development partner, outlined in Appendix 3, to approve the proposed terms of the development agreement by ACL as set out in Exempt Appendix 5, and to authorise myself in conjunction with the Strategic Director of Council Management and the Strategic Director of Place Prosperity and Sustainability to agree the final terms and development agreement to be entered into by ACL. This is obviously an important site. Arden Cross is a strategic development site of some 140 hectares located adjacent to the NEC, Birmingham International Airport and Birmingham International Train Station. It is also the location of the HS2 interchange station that's now under construction, and the site is principally owned by 3 landowners: Birmingham City Council, Packington Estate and the Kozel Estate, who have pooled their land interests to enable the delivery of a comprehensive mixed-use development, and have entered into an option agreement with ACL, which entitles ACL to draw down these land interests for the purposes of that development. Once fully developed, the site has the capacity to accommodate at least 27,000 jobs that will deliver an additional £1.4 billion of gross value added to the local economy each year. The gross development value of the site itself exceeds some £3 billion. And the master plan and business case have the support of local and regional government, and it's being currently mobilised with departments of central government who have offered support for the proposals. And in March 2021, the budget made provision of a financial support package by way of a 50 million grant to fund the first phase of the multi-storey car park, which enables then the rest of the development on the wider site. So as a result of the significant support for the master plan and business case, ACL now require an investment/development partner to take the project into the delivery stage. The proposal recommended represents best consideration and has been validated by ACL's appointed property advisor, JLL. Are there any comments or questions, Robert?
Thank you. Just one question. You mentioned there in the introduction about the land ownership, which is picked up on the map on page 25. Can we just get some confirmation about how the council's rate of return on the land, if it all goes ahead, compares to the other two landowners? Are we getting a similar rate of return?
Are there any other questions? I think we positively answer that. Let me bring in Paul Kitson, Strategic Director of Place Prosperity and Sustainability. Paul.
Thank you, Councillor. So there's an equalisation agreement for costs and benefits, which is quite standard practice on a collaboration agreement of that kind of mechanism. So regardless of what type of development, is there
It's just a question reading, Leader. Paragraph 3.7 of the report, there's the reference to the branch link for the Treasury to fund the multi-storey car park that you referred to in your introduction. And I just have a bit of a concern about the level of parking demand we're going to induce through this development. What dialogue we're going to have through the life of the development and look at ensuring that there are good sustainable transport options there.
Well, there will be public transport options that are available to people, but the idea here with this particular car park at the interchange station is that would be the people coming from the wider region to go to, rather than coming into the city centre to the Curzon Street station. So the idea of this is it will keep traffic out of the city and out of the clean air zone and direct it to the interchange station. And of course, the original plan was for a surface-based car park, which would have stymied any of the development we're considering in this report. So that money that enables the construction of a multi-storey car park really does enable the rest of this. And it is significant because, as I've said, 27,000 jobs and £1.4 billion of gross value added to the local economy will make a real difference to people's lives, particularly in East Birmingham, if we can connect those people up to those jobs, those 27,000 jobs that will be coming down the stream. There's nothing else. Can I ask then that we agree the recommendations, which are 2.1 through to 2.7? Agreed? Thank you. Item 7 is the corporate plan 2022 to 26, monitoring and reporting and delivery. Bridget.
Thank you. So you may recall at the last meeting, we approved the corporate plan. That went through council subsequently. This is seeking consideration and agreement to the proposed framework for reporting performance and delivery against that. It compromises the corporate performance and delivery plan attached on Appendix 1, which provides the key performance measures and delivery milestones that will be used to report progress and delivery against all of our key themes as a council. It's proposed that reporting against these milestones and measures to Cabinet will start next month, with the December meeting of Cabinet receiving a report summarising performance for the first quarters of the year, including both delivery milestones and performance measures to help give a balanced and triangulated view of progress and delivery. This is by no means the totality of council activity. Of course, we are a huge organisation, just around about 1,200 frontline services, measuring all of those. More of an industry will require a whole new council in itself to measure itself. What we have distilled this down to are the key things that we think affect our citizens and provide an overview of how the council is performing. It's proposed that we update these annually to make sure these measures remain current and relevant, and that the benchmarks as well that we have set and the targets we have set remain current and relevant. And the document in Appendix 1 includes the 22 to 23 activity. There's a refreshed suite of KPIs. We have worked with the directorates to fundamentally review the KPIs that are being reported to Cabinet to give a more focused set of around about 100 of them. There's a whole host of reasons. Ones have fallen off the list. Some of them have simply never been reported against. Others are blue, so we have taken them off. Others' priorities have changed and moved on. But I wanted to fundamentally get us away from simply observing our performance, being able to be in a position where we could really try to drive change in it. And this isn't, of course, a be-all and end-all of performance reporting. We have quarterly performance conversations within the directorate. Corporate leadership team does a monthly performance and delivery meeting as well. And OVN scrutiny performs a vital role in holding directorates to account on the greater set of indicators that sits beneath this. So with that, Leader, very happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Ewan?
Thank you very much, Ian. Just two, around the sort of current and relevant point that you made. One of them is under Be Safe, the metric around antisocial behaviour. I think from previous reports, what the metric used to be, number of incidents of antisocial behaviour reported to Birmingham City Council, and then it said the number of incidents closed, which I think we said at the time we had a concern about what closed meant. I didn't mean because closed is different from resolved, it just means it's been closed. And so obviously some residents obviously aren't always happy about that. I noticed that the new metric now says number of incidents of antisocial behaviour reported, fine, and then says percentage of incidents reported to within 48 hours. Well, that really doesn't tell us anything. That just means that we've got back to someone in 48 hours. It doesn't give an indication of what the resolution was. You know, have we achieved anything? And I think, you know, under the relevant thing, I think it's relevant to know how successful are we resolving antisocial behaviour rather than are we just responding to residents, which is just sort of a data exercise. And the other one is similar along the line under B Green. Report
Each numbers, please. There's 62 to scroll through.
Give me 2 seconds. I shall find that for you. Do you want me to name? I tell you what, I'll do my second point, and then once Councillor Alden and John are doing it, I'll find those numbers for you. Sure. The B Green reported bin collections per 100,000. It mentioned, it's something's been mentioned to me at ward meetings where people find that they don't feel comfortable about reporting. You know, they don't feel there's any point in reporting the missed collections. I think there's a LGA had the BVPI 88, the best value performance indicator, which has a subtle difference because that's known as the number of known missed collections. When Fleet and Waste came to our ward meeting recently, they were quite indignant because they said they know how many they collect and they know how many they miss. And so therefore, I think that, and I understand from that they've been recording this since January. So that metric is available since Jan. And I think that if we could change those two metrics, and I'll get you the page numbers for you, if we can change those two metrics to one being what actually happens to the end of ASB reported, and also the number of missed collections rather than missed collections reported, that'll probably be a more relevant stat. And thank you very much, Ian, for the detail that I'm going into there.
Thank you. John.
Thank you. A couple of things, if I may. I think what's interesting in this, which had been perhaps little noticed before, is that the localisation agenda has moved to the leader's portfolio, and there's quite a lot under the leader to deal with this question of local influence and involvement in how their area is run. I was a bit disappointed, and I'm sure we can be reassured there's more in the pipeline, that under that heading there was actually not a lot that was new. There are a few items that we know about. The only one which really ward forums and ward action plans. The measure on ward forums is the number of ward forums held, and I just wondered whether that would be better to be the number of people attending ward forums, which would be an indicator of their success and effectiveness. The report refers to the document Working Together for Neighbourhoods, page 16, which I was involved in on the community governance working group, which is very, very specific. It's about getting parish councils going and getting devolutions going, deals going with parish councils and town councils, which I think is important for those areas that have them, but affects a very limited part of the city. So, as I say, I'm just wondering whether there's going to be more in the pipeline on that, because I think there's more potential in that area. The other point I had was, again, picking up Ewan's point about antisocial behaviour. That measure seemed to me to be a slightly perverse incentive, only to measure the number of reports of antisocial behaviour, because you hope that reporting and recording of reports is thorough, but that does always create an incentive not to record reports and to discourage people from reporting items. So a measure that looks at outcomes of reporting might perhaps be more effective. Otherwise, I think we should note all the targets that are in here and continue to ask questions about them as are reported back in the course of the year.
Robert?
Thank you. I think overall, with a couple of caveats, it's generally a positive change in terms of the reporting. There's 7 or 8 which I've raised with officers who are going to come back around the wording, because the wording is slightly different to what the national measure is. And I just want clarity, is that just a translation error in that we've just used a different blurb, or is it we're actually measuring something different, which would be a concern? But I'll hold up on that until officers come back to confirm on that. I just wanted to follow up on one that Councillor Mackie raised around the reported miscollections per 100,000, which is on page 52 of the report, or 88 of the pack. So this is dealing with the reported miscollections to the council. Clearly, it would be more useful for the council to be aware of what's the actual number of miscollections, which is a figure I understand the council has been collecting since January. To put into context why it's important the council shows that, the reported number of miscollections since January, I understand from officers, is 18,526, but the actual number of properties not collected is 673,981. So that is considerably different magnitude to the number of reported ones. And it's clear that you won't be able to properly manage the service if you're dealing with a figure that is many magnitudes smaller than the actual real situation on the ground. So I would ask you to look at that one again and make sure you're at least in the blurb of the reporting of it, including the actual number of dropped collections rather than just the reported number. Thank you.
Thank you. Ewan?
Just to say that it's page 32 and a Be Safe KPI. There's no actual table number, unfortunately, but page 32 of the report, not the pack.
Thank you. Let me first of all bring in Majid on the issue around bins and bin collections. Majid?
Yeah, thank you. The performance indicator is just that, it's a performance indicator, not actual performance itself, which is what you and Bobby referring to, but it does help us to drive a deeper conversation with officers. If we add the green collections on Monday to Friday, sometimes we're near enough to 100,000 collections daily. The difficulty we would have in presenting missed collections, not everyone presents their bin for a collection every week. For example, on my run, I know at least 4 households don't always present their bin on a weekly basis because they don't accumulate that much waste to be able to present the bin. So that would actually be an inaccurate report in terms of it's not a missed collection because people haven't presented the bin. But that the report is presented to scrutiny when it has and when we are required to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Bridget?
Sure. So on the Be Safe one, so it's an interesting point. So we've got 2 measures here. We've got one about John might want to come back on some of this as well. We've got one about what's reported and one about sort of a customer's perception thing about how quickly these things are turned around, how they feel reported to. Obviously, there are so many more things we could be measuring. The departments will be measuring more behind the scenes, but this is sort of a headline set of indicators. So but I'll bring in John in a moment to comment on that. Again, on localization, there's the same comment applies to that, but there is something of a desire to keep some continuity between these measures and what we've had in previous years, so that we can see performance going over time. So that's why some of those things are carried on. But again, not the full suite of things is here. These are just the headlines. And then Bobby's point is a really interesting one, actually. So it should simply be a wording thing. I would hope if we've got help as you flags up the issues, we will look into them. They should be a wording thing, because the principle that I've laid down with all of this is that these things should be benchmarkable against other places, because otherwise, thank you for flagging them, and we'll get those looked into. I don't know if John wants to come in on the community safety one further.
Yeah, sure. And as you said, Bridget, there is information that's also collected beneath these headline measures. Of course, it's also important to remember in the context of antisocial behaviour, whilst things might be reported to us, the resolution of that doesn't always sit always with the council. It may be an issue for other agencies, the police, housing associations and so forth. So that's why we've presented this in this way. It also needs to be connected to the community trigger measure as well. Clearly, we may address a complaint that comes in. The resolution might not be to the satisfaction of the person who's made the initial complaint, and that then may lead to the use of the community trigger process, which of course is a means of formally resolving a concern that a person might have following that. But clearly there is information that sits underneath this, and we will be continuing to monitor the presentation of that as we take.
Thank you. If I just pick up the question that John raised about the localisation, you are correct. It has moved into my portfolio. I very much hope there is more in the pipeline. In fact, you'd be interested to learn there is a Labour group working group holding me to account to assure that there is more in the pipeline on this particular agenda. And the measure, interesting actually, because the number of people attending ward forums was originally in the suite of measures. I didn't think that was a very good proxy for how many people we are engaging with across the city, because how many people come out on a cold, wet December evening to attend a ward forum meeting, I think, inevitably will not be a good indicator of how we are engaging and consulting people across the city. So we have got the number of ward forum as a measure, because I do think we ought to be measuring how local elected members are facilitating the opportunity for the local community to attend a ward forum, and we know from the past 4 years that is not consistent across Birmingham, across all wards. So we've got that in there as a measure. I'm happy to have a conversation with you further outside this meeting about the other measure of how many people attend, because as I say, it was originally in, but I asked for it to be taken out. Anything further, Bridget?
Do you want to begin, Paul?
Oh, sorry, Paul.
But the only thing I'd add, Leader, is that obviously the performance report that we'll mobilise on next month is an opportunity also to any delivery activity achievements over and above the milestones listed in the report. I think that responds to one of the points raised by councillors. We don't have to be able to deliver milestones that other key developments and anticipated.
Thank you. Anything further, Bridge? No? In which case, can we agree recommendation 2-1? Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Moving on then, highway maintenance and management PFI contract. Liz.
Thanks very much, Leader. Yes, so there are three main purposes to this report. It's to update us all on the delivery of the investment programme, which has previously been agreed by Cabinet, an update on the procurement ongoing, and a couple of other related matters. So on the investment programme, as you'll have seen in the report, we've previously committed to a £148 million programme of investment running through to the summer of 2023. The majority of the activity in this programme will be on surfacing. £103 million of investment has been delivered to the end of September 2022. And in line with what I've just said, £97 million worth of that was on surfacing works. Progress is ongoing with the design of lighting, signals and structures works, and these will start over the next few months. And we are well placed to substantively deliver the whole programme by July 2023. So I think this is a very good news story for the city and for our residents, who we know are very concerned about the state of roads and pavements across the city and all the other bits of infrastructure and lighting. Turning to the procurement, the re-procurement of the remaining years of the PFI contract. Progress with this procurement for the PFI subcontractor by Birmingham Highways Limited is presented in the private report because it's an ongoing procurement. Procurement started formally in February 2022, and we expect it to conclude by the end of 2023. We're in the dialogue phase with bidders at the moment, and that's progressing positively. The council has submitted an outline business case to DfT on 30th of September, and we're asking you to note this. And there'll be a further report to Cabinet to approve a full business case next year. There are a couple of other matters that are picked up at the end of the report. One is seeking approval for the issuing of licences for hoarding, skips, scaffolding and materials on the highway to be brought back in-house into the council. And there's a bit of tidying up on procurement matters to do with condition works that were carried out on the A34 and the A45, and combining those with sprint works. That was done in the run-up to the Commonwealth Games. We took an opportunity to do some work to improve the condition of the carriageway at a critical time before we welcomed the world to Birmingham for the Commonwealth Games. So that's a quick overview, and I've got Kevin Hicks with me. It's obviously the expert, and I'm happy to take any questions through you, Leader.
Thanks very much, Liz. Obviously, this is a very important issue for the city as a whole, highways, street lighting. And it's good to see this now moving forward, given the problems we've had in the past with private contractors, legal action and all the rest of it. So let's hope now with a fair wind, we will get this over the line and commence in November of 2023. Robert.
Thank you. Just wanted to pick up a couple of points. So it's interesting under the value for money section 7.3.4, it highlights that obviously some value for money exercises were done and it shows that the benefits of the PFI continuing and the fact that doing it through that mechanism is actually shown to be cheaper than doing it through the council directly. Also wanted to pick up a couple of points around the timescales. So this report delays the sort of re-signing of the permanent PFI contract until November. That's a delay from the spring, which is already previously a delay. What isn't particularly clear. I wonder if the cabinet member could just expand on why there's a delay in the PFI being signed from spring next year to November. And then the other aspect is to do with the interim contract, which, although it's been extended already, is due to expire on the 31st of August next year, according to the report. Yet there isn't going to be a new contract in place till November. So that leaves a period when there isn't any coverage for highways maintenance in the city. So what's the plan for covering that 2 to 3 month period?
We'll get an answer to that. Ewan?
Thank you very much, Ian. Actually, I was going to mirror quite a lot of what Bobby was saying there. I think the PFI gives so much more value for money compared for the council, that is, compared to the type of grant that would be given to surrounding areas, etc. Equally, I was concerned about the delay. I mean, obviously, you're directly in conversation with government on this, but I'm hoping that the government are happy at the speed that we're moving at, because obviously should they, what would concern me was if they suddenly decided that we were unduly dragging our feet on this and decided that their contribution being so greater than if we're just going by the grant section, would revert back to a grant section. And the final bit I was going to say, I totally support the licensing of the skips, etc., coming back in-house. I think that's a very wise move. Looking forward to that, and look forward to a licensing system, obviously, for sort of works. Obviously, I've had some difficulties with Severn Trent in the past, and I'm looking forward to a licensing system that could hold our external contractors to account. Thank you very much, Ian.
Great to hear you back in public service, Ewan. Thank you. John.
Thank you. It's good to see progress in getting this sorted out. I think what I wanted to ask about and raise a discussion about was the prioritisation system for resurfacing works. This is one of the things that went very badly wrong with Amy, who relied on a computer which often got it wrong, with the result that roads that didn't need doing and pavements that didn't need doing well, residents were waiting for desperately unsafe roads to be done. And I'm not convinced that it's been sorted out from the recent lists of roads that have been done, certainly in my experience and that of other councillors I've spoken to, that there still seems to be a sense that very often the wrong road is done, often at great expense. The thing is that because you're in a ward, you only get 1 or 2 pavements done a year to highways. It's actually one of the major pieces of investment in a locality every year. And yet the process has never been transparent for selecting those roads and pavements. In the contracting, can you find a way to write in to make that process more transparent, more accountable? If a councillor asks why a road is in the programme, so we can actually get an answer as to why a road isn't in the programme. This refers to analysis of survey information, condition maps, sure enough, complaints, recommendations from local engineers and highway stewards, and other council priorities. And I'm not just lobbying for ward members to have a say on this, because I think it goes broader than that there are also potentially real opportunities, because it is such a big piece of investment in any locality. And particularly if you're doing a pavement, there may well be opportunities to actually reshape a whole neighbourhood if you combine that with local funding that's available for highways. But those opportunities don't happen because a road is done, it's on the programme, it gets done arbitrarily. There's minimal consultation with ward members, ward forums, when in actual fact you might come back and say, look, can you do some extra pieces of work to improve the verges, etc., on this road when you do it? We don't have those opportunities. So I'm saying there's an opportunity there which maybe you can take forward while these new contracts are being put in place.
Thank you. I do agree with you that there needs to be more engagement and consultation, even if it's only to give an explanation as to why one road is being resurfaced and another isn't, which is often to the layperson not immediately obvious. Then that explanation does need to be given at the very least. Liz.
Yes, thanks, Ian. I'd like to join with you in congratulating you and in his support for insourcing and bringing back a service into the direct management of the council as regards to those licences for skips and so on. Just on Councillor Alden's questions on timescales. As far as I understand it, the process was due to start in September of next 2023, and not in the spring. The reason why there's been some delays, that obviously, as you pointed out, it's imperative that we secure a successful procurement of a PFI and demonstrate value for money. And in order to do that, we need to keep both. We've got two bidders in the frame at the moment, and we need to keep them both in the process, because that's a key way of demonstrating competitiveness and value for money. And one of the bidders, who is the new one, has raised some issues about the advantage that the incumbent contractor might have through being in a position to have access to information and so on. So that's one of the reasons why I think a delay was agreed. On the prioritisation questions, as a local councillor, John, I share your frustrations, and obviously as a cyclist, one of the things that I do regularly in my own area is cycle around and just look at the states of some of the roads that we are asking people to drive along on the pavements. I am really keen on the system of highway stewards, which I think has actually been totally, revived, and beefed up in the current. Here, the highway steward in my area is excellent. If you go to him with an issue about a road, then he will be your voice then in the making the case for prioritising it. And there is an annual programme of resurfacing. But I'm going to hand over to Kevin now to say a bit more on the prioritisation question.
Kevin.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Just on a couple more detailed points there. So just to clarify the timelines. Yes, we've gone out. So last June, we came to Cabinet and reported the September 2023 for the implementation of the new project. That's now moved to November. There's been a 3-month, what we're seeking from DFT with the support of DFT at the moment is that 3-month extension to the submission of the business case. It would have gone in January next year, but we'll step now proposed to go in April. There'll be a 3-month extension to the submission of the business case by bidders. It gives the time that the members just mentioned in terms of bidding submissions. But we're only going to extend the overall time frame on implementation and going back into the PFI contract by 2 months. So effectively from September, which is what we reported last year, through to November the 1st instead. So the 2-month extension. Going straight onto that, to the other point that you raised, Councillor Alden, about we have a programme of works and currently takes through to August. It fits in with that. We've got a number of things, and we have restructuring agreements, and we have an interim services contract with here as well, all of which will need to be extended to cover that. And we're also going to extend the investment programme to do that. So there will be effectively bringing forward another investment programme to cover that 2-month extension as well from August, from September the 1st through to November the 1st next year. I'm just going on to the point with Rob's support and others. We've done this absolutely hand in glove with DFT and government. Totally supportive of the approach we're taking, and again, totally supportive of the approach we're taking in terms of the procurement and the ensuring that we've got competitive tech in the procurement process, and by that way we drive the value for money. I would absolutely agree with, as we've said with Councillor Hunt, the more we can get member involvement into those decisions on where investment is done, the better. It is very difficult often in timescales, and it is, as you said, difficult sometimes to tie that together with award money. We have got some good examples of putting different pots of revenue and funding together to make that happen. But yeah, if programmes could be aligned, that would be a massive advantage to us. I think it would be worth, through you, if we can put some information together. We did report in the June Cabinet last year on the principle of how those investment works were prioritised, which I know was another question that you had. So that does include things like the more technical side and condition surveys, scoring in terms of the condition of the road. But we have brought in, since last year, or since 2019, actually since the programme started in 2019, issue criteria such as where we have petitions, complaints, insurance claims. Those things are factored into how we prioritise which sites get the investment now. So there is a broader scale of things that we do now that we don't have, going back to the the bad old days with where some of those investment decisions were made with Amy. So we have a broader criterion spectrum now where we can influence where that's done. There is a degree of subjectivity to it, but I think Chair, through you, we will put a paper together that perhaps explain that to members in more detail.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Okay, if we're happy then, can we agree recommendation 2.1 through to 2.32? Agree? Thank you. Item 9 then is acceptance of the SEND Commissioner's recommendations. Karen.
Thank you, Leader. On one level, this is housekeeping. We've already accepted the Commissioner's recommendations. The legal and chief exec have written to him to accept those recommendations. So today we're looking to write that into Council's official record with documentation going back to the statutory direction from October 2021. You know, because you've reported in various places that the work outlined in those recommendations are on. As I said, today we're writing it into the Council's official record. We accept those recommendations and we work on them.
Thank you very much. Ewan.
Thank you very much, Ian. To obviously acknowledge that the report really from February 22, isn't it? And I think our position remains similar to that there. Obviously, parents, Ofsted, and other independent voices for the children have probably been let down severely. I think the report makes that clear. And as an opposition, we try to give a voice to those children and parents who feel and demand better. We note that the Commissioner has decided to give the Council one more chance here to put things right, but I think we feel that due to the importance and what's at stake, we would like to see this going into a trust now, just purely because the price of failure is too high, really. You know, we're talking about some very vulnerable children that need to be looked after sort of very well. I think they need to see the stability and get the improvements that everyone wants to see here. And I think too much time has been spent waiting for this service to be improved as it is. So, hence why we've been looking for that. There was a second point I was going to make that's sort of connected to this, is that obviously home to school transport is an important sort of aspect of this. And we were promised a plan that was going to come to September's Cabinet meeting. Then we were promised that it was going to come to today's Cabinet meeting. Councillor McCarthy very kindly emailed us saying that it was going to be to the new year. Obviously, I did ask if I did email back to say, could that be altered due to we've already missed 2 deadlines now, and this has been put back. And I think this is kind of an example of why this needs to go to a trust, because, you know, home school transport, as I say again, supposed to come to September, then we're supposed to come to October, now we're looking at the new year. And it's this sort of drift of strategic items that just really doesn't fill me with a lot of confidence that these goals are going to be hit. And so, yeah, we would like to see it going into a trust, albeit we do acknowledge what the Commissioner has said about one more chance for the Council. And thank you very much for giving the opportunity to speak in.
Thank you. Home school transport, of course, is not the subject of this report, but we will get you an answer on what you've raised. John.
Thank you. Just 2 things. The Commissioner has been very keen to engage with opposition leaders to ensure our buy-in to his recommendations, and I fully support all the measures that are taken to improve the service. I don't think over here that would be supporting the move to the trust unless it becomes absolutely necessary. I think there are more fundamental and broader problems with this area of service, which I think is picked up in the report, and that's going to be about making sure the accessible places in schools are there. I suspect, well, in fact, I know it's been undermined over the last few years by the academisation of the system, and I see the challenge that's been taken on here to work with schools and improve that. So we won't be supporting the move to the trust unless it's absolutely necessary. When we come to the finance report, we'll see that both the in-house service and the external trust service are both facing significant financial pressures. And that's very, very worrying across the board in terms of children's services, as I'm sure we all agree.
Yes, I think that's right. I think it's recognised there is a 2.6 billion, I think is the number, shortfall in funding for children's social care nationally. So it's no wonder that these services are struggling. Robert.
Thank you. Just to echo some of the comments we made, really, very much it's vital that we get this right in the service, and that's why this improvement journey is so important. And therefore, I do welcome the fact the Commissioner's been engaging with the opposition leaders as well over recent months. I think that's important. This report does have a slight air. I mean, the Cabinet member described it as housekeeping, and does have a slight air of the Council forgot the Cabinet actually needed to formally accept the recommendations, and therefore, when we're getting close to the next letter from the Commissioner, someone's highlighted, we better bring the previous one from quite a few months ago to Cabinet to be accepted. When you look into the details, obviously, the report highlights how we've got here the May 21 inspection and the fact that 12 out of 13 areas were highlighted as having significant weakness, which led to the statutory direction. I do think it is really important, though, that when you go through the recommendations in the update, that as much as possible is actually made public. And I know this is an area where there might be some difference in view between different people involved in this. When you take, for instance, the recommendation around the Sendias review that's from some 5 months ago now, that's still not in the public domain. And I think it's really important that the public in the city and the users of these services actually get to see the information that's being discussed as much as possible. And I think there is more that could be done around trying to make sure that there is proper buy-in and involvement from particularly the users of these services by them being kept up to date with the detail that is being discussed behind the scenes. So I think that's really important. And then the other question really is actually around the update that's attached in total, because obviously it's listed as August. We are now in November. I think it is a bit of a shame that this hadn't been refreshed to have a more up-to-date picture than where things were in August, given we are now in November.
Thank you for that. First of all, given that you've mentioned Sendias, could I have recorded a declaration of interest in respect of that, please? Secondly, there's been a number of comments around the trust and the way forward here. It's always been clear to me that what matters is what is in the best interests of children and young people in this city. Whether that is something running the council or run by a trust is I think irrelevant. What we ought to be addressing is what is the best option for children and young people. When the CQC findings were sent to the council, I had a meeting with the then minister. And in actual fact, I put to the minister that the way forward here was to move this service into the Children's Trust. It was the minister and her officials who drew back from that proposal because they were concerned that such a move may destabilise the Children's Trust. In the event, we didn't get a chance to, or we didn't test that out further with the government when we received the Commissioner's recommendation, because we decided instead to accept the recommendations rather than go down or have another conversation with government about moving the service into the Children's Trust. But I'm quite clear that if this service does not improve, then we will consider that option again. And I am prepared to have a further conversation with government about moving this service into the trust if we fail to improve the service in-house, and if it continues to be the view that that would be a better option than what we're currently doing. Karen.
Thank you, Leader. It was not just the home school transport I was referring to, and that the opposition leader was down that we weren't bringing detailed today. It was the whole directorate plan, and that was based on a decision by CLT to bring everything back as part of the next medium-term financial plan, rather than have a inherently competitive process between directorates popping up to move individual plans. So that made sense to me then, and it makes sense to me today. But the mention of home to school transport does allow me to address another issue, which Councillor Mahmood referred to earlier. The difference between indicators and lived experience. The improvement board and many other our organisation organisational hear the voice of experience, either collectively from our parent carer forum and individually from parents who feel they've got a view that we should hear. When we talk about 99.5% substitutes for transport, we never forget what that means for the 0.5% of families who we didn't give the service we were expecting. And the disruption, the stress, and anticipation of the next failure that brings. And that goes right to the end. We need to earn the trust of our families, particularly those who have been failed over the years, because we can get it right, but every time we get it wrong, they think they're going back to the beginning. And those families are always in our minds. In terms of looking at the trust, I would rather that our energies go into improving the service rather than the disruption and cost of looking at trust. But that comes with that determination to show improvement at pace. And for myself, I believe that the way we become a child-friendly city is to be able to challenge colleagues around the cabinet table for child-friendly transport, child-friendly housing. I can go right down the line, but I won't, on how every member of the cabinet has responsibilities that touch on the lives of those children. So we will keep on. This report brings us closer to up to date. The reports that go to the improvement board are closer to the current situation, and we will continue to discuss with the Commissioner how that information is shared. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we agree then? The two recommendations are in fact a note. So can we agree recommendations 2.1 and 2.2? Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 10 is financial monitoring report quarter 2 up to the 30th of September this year. Yvonne.
Leader and cabinet members, we are in unprecedented and extraordinary economic circumstances. No one would have imagined that the world would have been shut down for 2 years because of COVID. No one would have imagined that the United States of America would print almost 7 trillion US dollars, which is half the amount of dollars it's ever printed in the history of the United States of America. In 30 months, we printed over 500 billion to pay for furlough and support schemes. This printing of money has caused inflation in the United States and here. The country's debt is now the same as our gross domestic product, well over 2.2 trillion pounds. We need growth, leader, but our micro businesses are struggling too. To get inflation down, interest rates have been put up and will continue to go up. The cost of mortgages and loans will go up. Some will lose their homes and businesses, and there will be an increase in demand for council services, our services. Our food and petrol costs have escalated. OPEC has reduced by 2 million barrels a day its oil. UK's own energy costs have increased, only have limited supplies. Norway and others are selling us their gas for more. Our production and transportation costs have increased. China is in a state of intermittent lockdowns, which has affected companies that rely on them for parts. And of course, there is the war in the Ukraine. Leader, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, known as BRICS, decision to form its own currency will have an impact on Europe, our country, and us here in Birmingham. We as councils are already seeing people struggling. We are in a cost of living crisis. So I'm pleased that you, leader of this council, have the courage to declare a state of a cost of living emergency by establishing the warm spaces supporting food banks and advice organisations led by Councillor John Cott and supported by our chief executive and her officers. In particular, I see Richard Brooks here. We are, and all our political parties, We are collectively as a council acknowledging the very real difficulties many of our citizens are experiencing. In light of the exceptional circumstances and to reflect the economic turbulence, we are now providing monthly updates on the financial position to Cabinet and Scrutiny Committee for the remainder of the financial year. The Council's strategic aim is to deliver within the revenue budget by the end of this financial year, but this is going to be in an extraordinary hard year for councils across the entire country, as well as Birmingham. The council has identified a range of risks that, if not addressed, could result in an overspend of some 44.6 million. The risks that we have not yet been able to mitigate largely relate to the Children and Young People's Travel Service and Birmingham's Children's Trust. In both these cases, there are serious and major demand pressures that we, like many other councils, are facing. This is all in the context of the major pressures due to inflation that all councils are facing, including pay award, energy costs, and general inflation. As well as the risks mentioned previously, we have a large number of savings that are currently rated as medium to high risk. The council leadership team is working hard to ensure that these are achieved by the end of the year, as any non-delivery will cause overspends. The council has implemented a return to rigorous spending controls from July 2022. We will work to look to identify further mitigating actions to be taken. We will also be reviewing all the risks to identify. I don't know why I'm falling on my words. Sorry, we'll be reviewing all the risks to identify whether all the risks will be materialised. We will continue to update Cabinet each month on the progress on delivering a balanced position by year end. Whilst the council faces a very tough year financially, it is in a robust financial position with strong financial planning processes in place. Reserves are healthy and are within recommended limits. As well as seeking to achieve a balanced position for the current financial year, the Director of Council Management reported to Cabinet last month the gap of 80 million identified next year. Work is ongoing to find solutions that will close this gap, and good progress has already been made. There will be updates on that provided later in the financial year. I would like to refer to the capital budget. Following slippage at the end of 2021-22, Cabinet of the 11th of October approved an increase of 162.7 million to the capital budget for 2022 to 23, from 531.7 million to 694.4 million. At Q2, Cabinet is asked to approve a further 29 million increase due to new projects being approved and the new grant allocations from government. This would give a revised total capital programme of 723.4 million. Further details of the changes are provided in section 9 of Appendix 8. Leader, I recommend that the Cabinet approve the recommendation and notes the significant and unprecedented challenges we as a council face.
Thank you, Yvonne. As you say, we have to squeeze out this remaining budget at the end of the year. Robert.
Thank you. So turning to report, just picking up that point, obviously the report highlights there's a risk that this year's budget is going to be overspent by 45 million and that 15 million of savings are considered high risk. It also, when you dig into the detail of the report, and at 4.4 shows that the black hole that was in next year's budget of 33 million has now risen to 80 million. And of course, so that's a 47 million increase. And you can begin to see why that's happened when you look at table 1, because table 1 shows that 43 million worth of reserves are being used to prop up this year's budget. They're one-off savings that mean next year that 43 million still needs to be fined. And then there's another 13 million of other mitigations that again then need to be found in future years. So I think that gives some context as to this service we've been waiting for a while now. There has been an over-reliance on interim and agency staff, and indeed the answers to written questions at a recent council meeting highlight that in some areas it's up to 90% of staff are actually agency, and clearly this is now having a significant impact on the actual budget of the council. As we can see in this one service, 4.9 million overspend. That's running at a 49% overspend in that department. When you then go down to 2.8 on page 150 of the document pack, this picks up around the issues there's been, sorry, 2.7. This picks up the issues there's been around the parking income target. Now, we raised this a number of years ago, that if you go down the line that the council's gone down around making it more difficult for people to drive in the city, then you need to change your parking income targets, because clearly you're not going to have as many people parking here. That wasn't done, and now we're obviously seeing that there's actually a 4.3 million shortfall in income against the target, and the report is very clear that's due to the measures such as the CAS that have been introduced and the changing structure, the pizza slice and whatever your formal name is, for the cell structure in the city, that has meant that people end up having to drive all the way out to the ring road to travel but a few hundred metres. And so that really does need to be rebased. And you can go down, there's other examples, you go down to 2.8 and you look at 2.9, some of the issues there's been around the garage services and the trade waste. All of these are issues that have been well seen. In the example of the garage and the trade waste services, those ones have been overspent for years now. Clearly, the baseline budget is wrong, and the income targets are wrong. They need to be realigned in this year's budget process. And then the final thing I wanted to pick up was around Oracle. And in that table, table 1, it highlights the overspend in Oracle of 1.7 million. And of course, we know there are other impacts not directly related to where bills haven't been paid. There might be interest payments that the councils have to pay, where there's been issues like in the packages of care, issues, non-collection of client contributions. All of these things might not be directly related to Oracle, but the implementation issues that have been involved will have a knock-on effect. So again, that really needs to be nailed down to make sure there isn't then additional cost to the council's budget as the year progresses. Thank you.
Thank you. That issue you just raised about Oracle is an interesting one. I do think we need to clear that up. I'll ask Sarah Pitt to say something about it shortly, because as has repeatedly been reported, the budget for the delivery of Oracle is not overspent. What this is additional activity that's taking place outside of that budget. Ewan.
Thank you very much, Ian, and welcome some of the words from the cabinet member there. I think acknowledgement that we are in a international situation at the moment, inflation. There are many causes of it. There's Ukraine, United States of America, was going over that you mentioned, the furlough, etc., quantitative easing. Really important at the time to support people through the crisis that was the pandemic. There was lockdowns, etc. People couldn't go to work. But of course, with all that printing money, there is an inflationary effect on that. As I say, hooked it up with Ukraine, the things that the Fed are doing over in America has a massive worldwide impact that we're all seeing. And obviously, hopefully there could be an international cooperation between all our governments, including our own, to make sure that these prices can come back and come down to levels that are more manageable for all the households, especially those here in Birmingham. And hopefully the Ukraine situation can be resolved very soon. No sign of that at the moment, but sometimes the darkest hour is always just before dawn. And hopefully, things like that can be resolved. I echo Councillor Walden's comments on saying that we're all desperate for this area to succeed. We've got no objection to extra funds going into any of these departments if they're going to deliver, but it just seems to be an awful lot of money seems to be going out in interims, and I think permanent staff hopefully would be a better option for the council. As I say, 90% of agency does seem very high. I mentioned home to school transport earlier. I noticed that's looking at a £16 million overspend against budget of 40.5 million. I noticed that 6 million of that overspend has been relocated to transformation. I also note that there's a high number of interims and consultants in this department. And again, I hear what you said about the reason why this area is part of a larger plan is not coming to cabinet, etc., until January. But we were promised earlier in the year that it would come in September. Then we're promised that it come in October. Now it's been put back to later in the year, and we're seeing now that we're looking at a £16 million overspend. And I appreciate that things go on outside cabinet, but I just think a bit of scrutiny there that we could help supply as critical friends would help the department. Thank you again, Ian.
I don't think I can let you get away with blaming the situation in the country's economy entirely on international events. As we both know, we had an event a month ago, or just over a month ago, where the Conservative government crashed the UK economy. That led to a lack of confidence by investors. That is what led then to the Bank of England having to intervene to save the country from our own government. Quite extraordinary situation. A continuation of quantitative easing was the result of that, which has had an impact on inflation. On top of that, of course, because we've got such a large rate of inflation, we're seeing pay awards or demands for pay awards to keep pace with that, some of which is being given in the private sector. But of course, the government are determined to hold down public sector pay. That inevitably leads to difficulties on recruitment, which is part of the reason, not the whole reason, but part of the reason why we see so many interims in situ in various parts of the City Council. I accept that we've got to work to reduce that number, but it is partly we're in this position as a result of government policy. And as I've said, the government, the Tory government, trashing the UK economy. John.
Thank you. I'm in danger of agreeing with you about something. I think the one thing you forgot to mention is the block on wind turbine, onshore wind turbine development, which is the quickest means of increasing energy capacity in this country, and it's just not happening. It's been blocked by the new government. It'd be difficult to accuse the cabinet member of understating the situation, but I'm concerned that it might be slightly understated. Looking at that table 1, and the analysis has been done subtly around risks. We're told that 70% of the risks may not happen, although reading through them, it's quite difficult to see how they may not happen. And also looking at table 1, you see that a lot of the risks are being offset not by reducing the spending or managing to cap the spending, but by just putting reserves against them. So 42 million pound out of reserves is set against rising costs in many areas. And I'm not sure that means that we any longer have a healthy reserve situation. We have a good reserve situation, I understand that, but that level of drawdown is potentially quite alarming. Then you've got the 44 million pound, what's described as risk potential overspends, which has not got anything offsetting against it. And within that, you've got the 2 big headings. And I don't know if anybody's got any ideas what will be done, but the Children and Young People's Travel Service, £16 million, and the Children's Trust, £23.9 million. And according to the table, there's no planned mitigation, no planned reserve, drawing on reserve. And I'm not sure anybody believes that those costs can be capped. I'd love to be told I'm wrong, and that those costs might be capped within the year, but it seems there isn't a plan for that one yet.
Well, I'm now in danger of agreeing with you, because the pressures in the Children's Trust budget are to do with increased demand, so increased number of children coming forward that are having to be looked after, and increasing complexity. And as I said earlier, it's widely recognised now that social care, and children's social care in particular, has been massively underfunded by the government, and they need to come forward with a plan to address this. That's clearly the case. On the homeschool transport issue, we're now up to £40 million a year. It's clearly not value for money, and we've clearly got to do something to reform the way we are delivering that service currently. Karen.
There were 2 things that I found immensely helpful when I took on this role. One was the Commissioner's report that we've talked about earlier. The other is the independent review of children's social care, which also was published in May, on which we are still waiting for the government response to. And they've been busy with other things, but we really do need that response and that recognition that the social care market for children is broken. And that drives a large part of the pressure on the Children's Trust finances. Homeschool transport, reported regularly to scrutiny, process. There are plans to the costs back into line, but the priority was to get the service right and see what came from that. On agency staff, this is an issue. Both the use of agency staff and level of vacancy is an issue right across the council and right across the city. I know reason to believe it's not the national issue. What we've got to do is get the message out that Birmingham is a great place to work. Birmingham City Council is a great place to work. And children's services are on an improvement route. But we welcome permanent staff who want to be part of that. Thank you.
Thank you. We agree then, recommendations 2.1 through to 2.3. Is that agreed? Agreed. You, does anybody wish to take a comfort break? Are we all okay? In which case we'll move on. Item 11 then, digital strategy for 2022 through to 25, technology roadmap. Councillor Francis has given her apologies, so Larry is going to present. I'm sorry, Yvonne, you're going to present this.
Want some red lipstick?
Clearly my short-term memory from yesterday lunchtime is not working. Yvonne.
Thank you, Leader. I'm presenting on behalf of Councillor Jane Francis. We are adopting a platform plus agile approach to delivering our technology roadmap. The platform plus agile is the opposite approach from our previous strategy, which saw each application and system as a unique one-off event. The old thinking was partly inherited from a strategic partnership incentivized to grow the council's technology estate rather than optimize its efficiency and effectiveness, with fundamental contractual blockers to disincentivize a reduction in that estate. The fundamental mindset of platform plus agile is that each application inherits as much as possible of the standard and common functionality of the platforms we have already invested in. In line with the approach, we are renewing our Microsoft license and taking the opportunity to standardize further on the various capabilities the Microsoft 365 platform license can provide, all of which are part of the digital strategy and all managed within our existing budget envelope. We are also using procurement to reiterate some key principles that will help us further drive away from the inherited approach from Capita that has led us to manage a lot of technology debt and use the key approaches and messaging to manage our council-wide digital data technology ecosystem better. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Yvonne. Comments, Ewan.
Thank you very much, Ian. Welcome this report. I think using Office 365 enterprise platform is a good move. It's widely understood. It's a benchmark that basically all companies judge themselves against, mostly anyway, and they staff regularly use it. So if new staff coming in, we don't have to train them up. They understand how the systems work, etc. The Azure cloud storage, Microsoft started investing in data centers well before most other players got involved in the market. Got worldwide data centers everywhere. They can move data between data centers seamlessly. So if there's any outage, etc., us as their customers very often don't even notice it. But the question that does lead me to come to this is what sort of policy and how are we handling the backups of everything that we've got here as a council? Putting it into Azure, that itself is an option. I know we have our own data centers, or we certainly had them in the past, and how does this fit in? And obviously, do we have items that are not connected to the internet? I'm thinking that should we get some sort of hack where our data is encrypted, which can happen with some of these hacks that get into the system, and then they ask you for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pounds to get your data back. And so I've got nothing against this. I'm just wondering what plans that we've got to secure our data and how the work control of it, and make sure that if it stays within Europe, I think it kind of has to now. And you have to tell Microsoft if you don't want your data to go outside Europe, otherwise they can send it to other places. And of course, that can have implications for GDPR, etc. And obviously stop the American government from getting into it, etc. So that's the question I was going to ask. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll get you an answer on that. John?
Thank you. I wanted to relate this to a couple of other items on this agenda. I think this is welcome. The the below the line costings, I don't think are in the public reports, but they look quite good. One of the issues which it raised for me is that if we are saying we're going to move away from bespoke solutions, expensive bespoke solutions, use what's there in common, does the council know what skills it has in handling basic Microsoft software? Because I think there's a lot of staff out there who are very good on spreadsheets whose skills are not recognised. Similarly, you might get sections where people suddenly draw a blank or see something red when they're asked to use a spreadsheet, and off they go and they employ consultants. Would Oracle have happened under this digital strategy? Because that's a bespoke solution, and that's causing, well, is it causing financial problems? It's certainly causing operational problems at the moment. And then item 13, we see the issue of the £330,000 that was spent on a bespoke case management system for the Homes for Ukrainians scheme. And that's an astonishing amount for, I think, about 500-600 families. I think it costs about £500 a family for each line of the spreadsheet that might have been devised. Why is a department going off and spending that amount of money on a case management system when we have access to spreadsheets and we probably have access to the in-house skills? And if we don't have access to them, for the sums of money that are being spent, they could be accessed quite easily and readily at much lower costs.
Thank you. First of all, let me just tidy up this issue around the spend on Oracle that was raised on the financial monitoring report. As I said, that sum of money, 1.7 million, sits outside of the budget for delivering Oracle. I'll bring Sarah Pitt in to just explain what has happened here. Sarah?
Yeah, so the 1.7 million is based on process change and readiness for change, and they are expected to be short-term costs, so none of that is ongoing cost in any way, but it's just been around business re-engineering primarily, so not directly in how Oracle works, but it's just realigning some of our processes around that and just getting an embedding process implemented, so not directly on the capital of the project itself.
Robert?
Just very quickly, I think that's the point I'm trying to get. There's been an awful lot of indirect costs which are related to Oracle because it's allowing the rest of the council to then work with Oracle, which aren't covered because the Oracle budget doesn't directly cover them. But they weren't budgeted for either. And I just think there needs to be a look at all of those costs overall so we can actually get a true cost of what it's cost us to get the council working in Oracle.
Yeah, at least you have put your finger on the right issue there. That is exactly correct. Let me bring in Peter Bishop to answer the rest of the issues that were raised on this. Peter.
So, Councillor Mackey, we operate a mix of what you might call private cloud, so our own data centre, and as you really recognise, the issue of platform is effective. But that doesn't mean that it is in an unsecure or unbacked up environment, and it meets all the regulatory requirements about how data is used and where it is stored. In terms of our own backups, we have, as part of our cybersecurity implementation, implemented quite a few different technical controls to control and prevent anybody getting into our backups. We effectively have now what you might call immutable backups that are safe from being encrypted through a ransomware attack. So I'm confident that we're okay. That doesn't mean that any data privacy impact assessments will not be done when we work with the Azure platform as we start to bring different data sets together and start to drive better decision making by doing that. In some respects, Councillor Hunter, your point about bespoke solutions, we actually want to start doing a little bit more of this through the adoption of different and common platforms. So Ukraine's a good example where, because of the timing, we've had to effectively ask somebody else to develop it for us because of the pace upon which we had to do. But it sort of illustrates the point that we have case management systems that we are not effectively utilising and should be utilising. And also we should have our own development of dashboarding skills that goes alongside Now, by bringing the services back in-house, we have been able to take control then of the direction of travel for how we develop our own skills, so that we become that data-driven and user-driven digital service. And we're currently in the process of restructuring the whole service end-to-end to drive more skills development across our own IT teams in those areas of dashboard development and case management and utilising our platforms more effectively. Obviously, that it will take a long while to unwind the level of technology debt that we have. 15 years with one provider who was completely incentivised to sell us more and more stuff, which we then bought. It takes a long while to unwind, but it is crucial to our future that we unwind that and get the benefits. And in some respects, the E3 to E5 position is just the start of the process of rationalising and standardising platforms.
Pick up the issue about spreadsheets.
Well, spreadsheets are clearly a tool that can be used, but the beauty of the work that's been done to support the Ukraine solution is the quality of the dashboarding. Again, this reiterates why we need to move to the Microsoft E5 position so that we can start to get individuals and teams to start using the Power BI technology more directly themselves, and they can create better dashboards based on the data that they have got. And that's all part of the plan for the work on the digital strategy. I don't know whether Richard, you want to say any more on it?
Just to say the Ukraine solution is certainly not just a spreadsheet. It's actually not just the dashboard. The dashboard is the front end of a system that both integrates data from national and local sources, allows us to manage our major contracts in this area, and really plays a big role in helping to keep to ensure that we provide services. I think it's wrong that ideally we would be able to develop this kind of work internally, and it's quite important for us to learn the lesson of using the iPod systems that we brought in and see if we can get in the future. But the product is a nationally leading group of our Ukrainian guests. So we recognise by the part as having most advanced systems here, properly managing our response through the data. And I think that is worth the money that we spend, even though in the future I'd like to be able to existing capacity for adult, both in my direction and
Thank you. In which case, can we agree then, recommendations 2.1 through to 2.4? Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Item 12 then is housing repairs, maintenance and investment 2024. Sharon.
Thank you. So I'm assuming that everyone has read the papers. Just in terms of the background, this report is about the recommissioning of the provision for responsive repairs and maintenance services, gas servicing and capital improvement work. And this is about the contract on the 1st of April 2024. Currently, Equans and Fortem are contractors and now expiring 31st of March 2024. So it's important that we move forward with this. And all the details are in the report. I will say now, because I know the cabinet members across the room, there have been some issues previously in terms of performance. We've got one of our former contractors for West Central and East. However, we had to make a difficult decision to end up based on performance, and now we have a new contractor. Things are working a lot better. So we've improved on performance. So I acknowledge the fact that there has been some concerns, because I've seen it in my inbox. I'm confident that moving forward, once we get the new contract in place, especially, that things will be better.
Thank you very much. Any comments on this, Robert?
Thank you. Just two particular points I want to pick up. First is highlighted in 7.4.1, page 221 of the document pack. And this is a real concern here. So we all know the issues the council had with the last procurement it did around this and the legal challenge there was. But the council is now proposing to spend an estimated £500,000 on consultancy resources to help do the procurement. That's money that's going to come directly out of the HRA account. So that is tenants' money that is meant for the repairs and maintenance and upgrading of council properties in the city that is going to go to consultants because the council doesn't feel it can do the procurement properly. That is a real concern. And I really do, well, I'd ask you to look at that again, because I think that is money being taken directly away from what the purpose of the HRA is, which is to look after the tenants' properties in this city. The other aspect is a slightly less serious one. When you go to the appendix and the sort of options appraisal that's been done, the numbers of council properties in the city don't tally up in the ARC report with what the council then has in its document later. So there's a discrepancy between how many properties it says it covers. And I just wondered if a cabinet member can identify which of the figures is correct and why there's a discrepancy, because it doesn't seem to explain in the report why the ARC document has different amount of council properties to the council report. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. One specific question, first of all. What's going to be the role of tenant involvement in the awarding of contracts? Will there be stakeholder panels? Some mention of it in these reports, but good practice tends to suggest maybe stakeholder panels where tenant representatives actually meet the contractors and ask them the necessary hard questions. Broadly, I welcome this. I think the assessment that's here is very, very interesting, and I think it's welcome. Frankly, the Labour group has moved away from its 2018 fundamentalist position, which was all about insourcing everything. I think it's necessary, particularly with a council of this size, to be pragmatic about how things are approached. And although this is not like this housing repairs is not perfect, this solved a lot of problems when it was put in, and actually, as the reports show, offers some quite significant and innovative ways of working compared with other councils that Birmingham can do, in particular the ability to hold contractors to account for what they've signed up to, which is the problem with in-house services. We do think this needs to be explored on our side for waste collection, which seems to be bedeviled by some of the similar problems that housing repairs have been in the past. As I say, being pragmatic about it.
Okay, thank you. Shan.
I'll take the last one first, if that's okay. So that's thank you, Councillor, for your question in terms of tenant engagement as a process. There will be tenant engagement. It's not just the case of stakeholder panels, but I'm aware that City HLB will have 4 members on the group who will be on the scoring panel. So there will be full engagement as much as possible in terms of engagement with tenants, but obviously we've got 60,000 tenants, possible to engage more in that particular manner. But yes, we will be looking at that. In terms of councillor order, consultants and consultancy is always something that comes up quite often, and I think we have issues across, but I think we all probably agree in terms of their members and the preference is probably not to have as much of that. We have to take into consideration that this is a contract of, I think it's 1.6 billion pounds. So in terms of the money, that's 1.4 billion pounds in total and over 10 years, the significant figures would actually say that the actual amount that's gone to in terms of consultancy isn't as disproportionate as it would be seen. But I will let one of the officers come in on
Steve, Steve Sandiger.
Let Steve come in on terms of why we have gone to consultants on that.
Steve?
Yeah, hello, thank you, Chair. Thank you for that point. In regards to the support of the consultants are acting as technical advisors in helping us to develop the actual specification, shall we say, as to how we appoint that ultimate specification and how it's developed. Clearly, there is a significant procurement activity involved in this. We are, as a service, internally supporting from a governance angle and making sure that the necessary due diligence and compliance with the public contract regulations is also undertaken as well. But the activity of the consultants in this instance is like I said, very much helping us to support from the technical aspects of the development of that specification and how that feeds into the procurement process and activity. I'm not sure whether Paul Langford is also in the room to add any further context to that point.
Thank you.
So you have the answer there, probably, but I will say in terms of the housing department, there's a number of posts that we are recruiting to at the moment, and those recruitments will help us in terms of making sure that we reduce the numbers of interims and consultants in the department overall.
The discrepancy in the number of council properties. Happy for you to take it away and ask someone to call.
Yeah, we'll send you that in writing. Can we agree then recommendations 2.1 through to 2.7? Is that agreed? Thank you. 13 then, quarterly assurance update for periods 3 June through to the end of September this year. Procurement and contract governance rules. Yvonne.
Colleagues will be aware of the recent introduction of the new procurement and contract governance rules. And as part of those rules, there is a new requirement to report 2 cabinet decisions that have been taken in respect of waivers, emergency process, negotiated procedure and breaches. Attached is the first report since the adoption of the new rules and covers the period June 2022 to the end of September 2022. The Appendix A addendum covers the amended wording to the waiver procedure report section in that column, reason for breach. This report highlights that during this period there were 6 waivers, 6 breaches and 12 negotiated procedures. In respect of the breaches, I would like to reassure Cabinet that there are corrective measures in place to ensure that compliance with the new rules is achieved. I would also like to add that the changes and adoption of new rules is a positive step and will help us as a council to improve transparency and accountability around our tendering and contractual arrangements, as well as to ensure that plans are put in place where things have not been carried out correctly. And I would trust that members also welcome the inclusion of this new quarterly report process, which will over time lead to improvements to compliance and how our third-party contracts are procured. Thank you, Leader.
Robert.
Thank you. So I welcome the instructions report. I think it's good, but I do think it's going to need to be tweaked going forward based on some of the feedback I'm going to give to make it more meaningful. So when you pick up the table, there's a number of things I wanted to raise. The first, obviously at the last council meeting, Councillor John Cotton highlighted to Councillor Abshir that the decision around the extension of the contract could have been called in, so he was wrong to say it couldn't. What this table tells us is that actually a decision was taken to waive a cabinet decision in relation to extending the contract. So I suspect that probably couldn't have been called in if there was a waiving of the cabinet decision. I'll leave Councillor Cotton to decide if he wants to speak to Councillor Leaf about that. So going down,
which one are you on the time?
So the second one, Ukrainian response programme, 330,000, and in the which part or parts of the procurement and contract rules are sought to be waived, it says the key element in the rules to be waived is the cabinet decision. Going down onto the next one, the vision screening services for 4 to 5-year-old children. Now this gives in a primary reason for the waiver, the primary justification is efficiency, expediency in relation to process. But when you go 2 columns across, it highlights that reference to the contract extension clause was actually missing from the original cabinet report. Now this highlights a couple of things. Firstly, I would certainly be interested to hear legal services view as to whether it's legal to do a contract extension which isn't referred to in the cabinet report, because no cabinet approval has actually been given if it's not referred to in the report. But also, I would say it is misleading to say that the primary reason for it is efficiency and expedience, when the primary reason is because a mistake was made in the cabinet report. And if these are going to be meaningful, then they actually need to own the mistakes made and not try and pass it off as efficiency reasons and acting quickly as a council, fleet of foot, as the council likes to say. And on a similar vein, going down to the pre-employment checks, one, which is on the next page, third from the bottom. On this one, the primary reason given is time constraints beyond the control of the council. And a couple of columns over it goes, the areas it's highlighted above are required in relation to speed and efficiency. New legislation comes into force on the 1st of October, etc. This, I believe, is factually incorrect. The legislation that changed was in relation to exemptions that were made by the government in March 2020 because of COVID, and were extended to the end of September 2022. So it's not new legislation, it's actually a return to the original legislation. NHS employers posted on their employment website on the 14th of March about this change and the need to be ready for when it returns back on the 1st of October. So I think it is grossly misleading to say that the council didn't have enough time to know that they needed to go back to that change. What's happened here is the council didn't act quickly enough. And again, if this report is going to mean anything, council needs to own up when it's not acted quickly enough so that we can actually get that right in future, rather than claiming new legislation's come into effect. And therefore, there's a time constraint from that, because other employees have been talking about this for more than 6 months. Thank you.
Thank you. Ewan.
Yeah, I mean, just a housekeeping point, really. Page 69 of 82 of the report. There's a table, repairs last 12 months per property divided by number of stock. It's an image of a scrollable table. So obviously we can't access the data in it. So I was just going to ask if the actual table in its full glory could be shared with us, because at the moment we can't look at the contents of it.
Okay, thank you. Steve, Steve on the screen to avoid confusion. You're going to respond to this?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Sorry, on that last point, which table was that? Sorry, I missed the reference.
Which table are you referring to?
Let me check this. I might have got the wrong item.
I'm not sure whether this is the
last
correct.
one,
Yeah.
Steve. I think
Okay.
I think
It's not a housing report, there's a table that you can't.
Yeah, I might have done. I may have put it against 13. It might have been 12. Let me check that.
Okay, I think it may be a previous report, but yes, noted, and certainly take on board the points here, with regards to the accuracy of the information that's been put into the various reports. You've referenced the Ukraine response and also the screening services and the primary reason, and not necessarily a match on that, and also then the employment check positions as well. I think probably what I would need to do is just take those away, Chair, if possible, and then provide a more substantive response. But certainly what we would look to then do is ensure then for the next quarterly reports that the information is is consistent and is accurate with the information or the decisions that have been taken going forward. So we certainly want to make this a meaningful report and clearly accurate in terms of its content going forward.
Thank you, Steve. I think, because I had a question myself, actually, in respect of the interim HR project manager. The final column just says appropriate approval not sought to utilise the framework. It doesn't give you any explanation as to why that appropriate approval was not sought. So I do think there's quite a bit of work can be done to make this more transparent, to give more information as to why these things are happening. And I think for the next one, it might be useful if you were to meet and discuss the report with the two opposition leaders and myself before this report lands at Cabinet.
By all means,
probably avoid many of these issues.
Yeah, by all means, more than happy to do that, Chair. And like I said, with a new process, we will certainly work with Cabinet to ensure that going forward it's exactly where we need it to be, around content and also clarity.
Thank you. Yvonne, anything to add? Okay, we agree recommendation 2.1, is that agreed?
Agreed.
Moving then to 14, Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund Wave 2, approval to bid and approval to spend. Sharon.
So the government has set targets for all social landlords to achieve the minimum EPC rating of C by 2030, and within the housing stock, 68% of our properties currently have a rating of B or below. I mean, you know, we must act really to make sure that we bring up those ratings. This is an opportunity for us to bid in for this money, but 50% of the overall cost has to be met by the authority itself. So this bid is asking for us to be able, the Cabinet has approved us to bid for £23.3 billion for funding support for this delivery for this programme. And also, we're seeking to increase our additional borrowing of 99 million. Which is a significant amount, but it is an amount that the HRA can afford, and it does remain within our prudent borrowing parameters. So this isn't the same as the programme that brought forward recently for the 300 properties over in the east for the retrofit. This is this is a separate project, and I think it's the right thing to do. We do have a number of priorities in housing. One of them is building safety and compliance, then decent homes, and also Route to Zero, which is the decarbonisation. And they're all important in their own right. But I would say that this is an opportunity. If we don't do this now, we will need to do it in the future, and it will cost us an additional, we'd have to find an additional 23 million as opposed to the 99 that we're going to have to do in the interim. So I'm asking the Cabinet to approve this report.
John.
Thank you very much. Welcome this move. Good investment. The one point to make, similar to the previous item, with Sharon, is about tenant involvement and engagement, because feedback I've got is that if tenants understand what's going on, then they make better use of what's being done, and they can use what's being done to help reduce their energy costs. But sometimes they don't understand what's being done, and then it's wasted.
Thank you. Yeah, welcome bidding for this. It's really just around a value for money aspect. And I just urge that we do make sure we do proper surveys of the stock that's being chosen for this project to make sure that the retrofitting improvement onto it is the best use, and that we don't end up doing something that actually is more costly than rebuild where it's more appropriate. Because I can think of so many examples under 3.7 in the city. It would clearly be more appropriate for the tenants in there for them to be rebuilt rather than having more money spent doing that, which would be less effective. Thank you.
Yeah. Karen.
Just on that point, Rob, I think we've had several conversations, and I've had the chief executive as well, and also the kids and Lamford about properties. I think we're all very clear where there is, you know, look at the financial cost and where there are properties where it won't be efficient for us to spend that more money into it, and there is an option to look at maybe regen or you know, rebuilding, then those measures will be taken, because we've got to get what's best for the residents and try to take as many of these agendas in the solution as possible. And as you rightly say, to make sure that we get the best for the money, the value for the money that we've got. So we are looking at that, and you know, those things are being taken seriously. In terms of tenant engagement is something that's on the agenda, and we are looking at different ways to engage with tenants. I think when we did the programme around sprinklers, we learned a lot along the way about how we engage with our tenants, and actually the importance of people understanding what's going to be taking place in their properties. And we'll be making all efforts to make sure that we engage with tenants, because if we don't, the likelihood is they will not let us into their properties to do the work, and that's not a place where we want to be. So we will be taking tenants along with us. I know, Bobby, you asked a question also about, is it around the selection of the properties? And I'm going to let Steve answer that question. That's okay.
Yeah, so we've already conducted a significant surveys, over 2,000 surveys of properties. We're taking that initially from the archetype information from the asset management system, focused on the most difficult to heat properties, and cross-referencing that on most vulnerable people in our city as well. So we're trying to have a double whammy effect really of treating the most difficult to heat properties and also the most in deprivation in free property. That's how we're targeting the first tranche of properties. But like I say, we've surveyed over 2,000. All of them have got a viable properties, insofar as they're all properties that we keep, but not looking to be generating in years to come. And also, like I say, ones that are below EPC or E and EPC decorated. For the insulated properties that we've got.
Thank you. Chair, then can we agree recommendations 2.1 through to 2.4? That agree?
Agreed.
Item 15, two items listed under agenda item 15. First, key decisions, planned procurement activities November through to January next year, and quarterly contract awards for the period April through to June this year. Yvonne.
Thank you, Leader. This report provides details of procurement activity for the period December 2022, February 2023, which are key decisions. Ask the Cabinet to approve procurement activities.
Thank you. Any questions or comments, Rod?
Yeah, thank you. I'm seeking some clarity on one of them. So on the report to February, one of the items that's going to be coming up for procurement is the clearance, demolition and remediation of the Bordsley Park site. But when you look at the June 28th Cabinet report, 4.3 in that site says the sale of the subject property will remove remediation and financial risks and ongoing management liability from the council. So if a cabinet decision in June means we no longer need to pay for the remediation, why have we now got a contract coming forward to remediate the land?
It's a very good question. I'm not entirely certain we're going to be able to provide you an answer in this meeting. It may well be we'll have to provide you with a written answer. Okay. No further comment. Can we agree on the recommendations 2.1 and 2.2? So agreed. And we'll move on to key decisions, planned procurement activities December through to February of next year. Yvonne. Thank you. Any comments on this? No. Can we agree recommendation 2.1 then? Is that agreed? And then finally, any other urgent business? Does anybody have any? No. Thank you all very much.